Hey guys, and welcome back to another day of the League of Legends camp. Is everybody having a good day? I will take that as a yes. Today we're going to be covering positioning and team fights. This is going to be the second session for us in the competitive camp. Hope that some people are able to join us from the developmental camp. Likewise, anybody here today, please join us again on Thursday for the next session of the developmental camp as well. Today's going to be a little bit different. I know that we typically do kind of a presentation and then we jump into some in-game stuff. Because we're going to be covering positioning and team fights, it's kind of difficult for me to handle that on my own, as you guys could imagine. So what we're going to be doing today is we'll go through the presentation, do a little bit of recap from the first session, go over today's lesson, and then we're actually going to do some VOD review and go through some clips from some different matches that have happened from various world tournaments, as well as most recently some playoffs for the LCS, and then of course open it up to Q&A. So please keep in mind if you do have any questions regarding maybe a situation that happened to you in a match recently regarding your positioning or a team fight and how it played out, please make sure to ask those in chat. So, without further ado, let's recap from last session what we talked about real quick. So we talked about neutral objectives as well as communication, and that was ineffective communication, which, if you recall, we referred to that basically as just talking. So you're not really giving your teammates any strategic information, anything helpful. It's kind of just, either communicating irrelevant information, maybe being toxic, maybe expressing your frustration, whatever it may be, versus effective communication, actually working to create and formalize a strategy with your team, thinking ahead and being proactive, and giving them the information that they need to be able to make good decisions. So again, it goes back to kind of planning out champion select. What kind of composition are we going to look to draft? What kind of composition is the team ultimately looking to draft? And how can we come out on top? How can we set our team up to be successful? Having that planned out ahead of time. Beyond that, discussing pathing routes for the jungler and at the early stage of the game, maybe as well as the potential enemy jungler, lane priorities, vision control, things of that nature. And then as far as the neutral objectives go, we covered how effective communication is going to actually be necessary to be able to contest and take those neutral objectives, as well as considering kind of the current game state. So if you have a scaling composition, if they do, who's winning, what the team compositions look like overall, what the wave management looks like. Do you guys have that vision control needed to take those neutral objectives? So a couple of things there as far as what you can consider. So I hope that if you were in the first session, you were able to kind of take some of those things and implement those into your gameplay in your matches over the last week. So today, like I said, we're going to cover positioning and team fights. So I want to tie last lesson into today's lesson. So how exactly does effective communication play a role in positioning? So consider different things like who's wanting to engage. So whoever's going to be making the call, you guys need to determine that, because ultimately what happens is if you don't clarify who's going to be making the call to engage, potentially you're overlapping calls. One person sees something a little bit different, they end up calling the target, and then you're not really on the same page. You guys end up having a very disjointed team fight potentially, because not everybody knew who you were clearly supposed to engage upon. And so that goes hand in hand with the who are you wanting to engage on, making sure that, again, that everybody's on the same page. So when do you want to engage? There's a lot of different nuances to this game, as we've covered before. So whenever I give some examples like this, don't take it as these are the only times that you want to engage, but these are some examples of times that you want to engage or consider the opportunity to engage. So for example, the videos that we're going to be covering, is the opponent out of position? Is their primary threat out of position the carry? So going to cover a lot of opportunities where pro players get caught out. It happens all the time, but if you do see the primary threat out of position, that's a really good time to consider engaging. Is the whole enemy team out of position? If you're able to catch the entire enemy team out of position and initiate with a bunch of ultimates simultaneously and actually crowd control them, regardless of if you're behind or not. It's pretty devastating, so that's a good opportunity. And is somebody coming back from a recall on your team, or is somebody recalling on their team, right? You have a numbers advantage. This kind of goes hand in hand with, let's say you have a 1-3-1 split, right? And you have all 5 people at middle, and you're able to have a 5 versus 3. Same thing if somebody else on the other team is just recalling and you have a 5 versus 4. If you're trying to get those numbers advantages, those are good opportunities. Now, having said that, if you look at the 1-3-1 situation, if you have somebody that is in one of those side lanes and they're pushing, let's just say Jax, for example, a good split pusher or Tryndamere, something of that nature, and they're already at your inhibitor, well, it's probably too late to consider engaging, because those are the types of carries that if they have a wave with them to push, they can just end the game. So whenever you're going to engage in those numbers advantages, like a 5 versus 3, you need to consider the positioning of the other opponent. If they can go and take a bunch of turrets or your inhibitors or just end the game, obviously you don't want to engage even if you do have the numbers advantage. And then are you waiting to bait the enemy team into engaging so that you can counter engage, right? That is a psychological move to be able to intentionally be out of position, knowing that maybe you can flash away or that your team's waiting nearby so that they can counter engage so that you guys can actually get the win. So a couple of different examples of, when do you want to actually engage? And then beyond that, how does effective communication play a role as far as how do you need to play the actual team fight? There's a variety of different ways to look to play team fights, but you don't want to go in with the mentality of just, fighting to fight and that, oh yeah, every team fight's going to be the same. We're just going to, do whatever we can and just hit the person right next to us. Or we're just going to dive in on their carry. Those are strategies. You can play front to back where you have to slowly go through their team and you do enough damage to their tanks to where you can get to their backline. Maybe their backline's weaker and they're not doing enough damage to your tanks. Or maybe you have a dive composition. Maybe you have something like Malphite or a Jarvan or a Rakan, something like that, where you're able to just go in on the enemy team relentlessly and just hard engage in them. But that type of communication is needed to be able to strategize how exactly you want to go in. Beyond that, communicating, if you're the AD carry, maybe you're a mobile, maybe they have a very dive-heavy composition. We talked about in last session how Tahm Kench has been really prevalent. Rather than having the Tahm Kench try to be aggressive and try to catch people and do damage, communicating, hey, I actually need you guys to peel for me. I need you to peel the enemy team off of me. I need you to help me be able to do damage by not getting dove on, by not getting CC'd, so on and so forth. So letting your team know exactly what you need so that you can be effective is, again, how effective communication plays a role in the positioning and team fights. So from there, looking at how your role actually impacts your position. So whenever you think about whatever position you may play, top, jungle, middle, AD carry, support, so on and so forth, don't think of it as, well, I'm playing this position, this is how I'm playing this role, this impacts my positioning. It's not really like that. We're going to go through a couple of different itemization concepts later on, but the combination of what champion you're playing, the runes and the masteries that you're taking, as well as your actual itemization, that dictates how you're going to play your champion, the positioning that you should have in team fights, what the role you're actually playing in the game is. So if you think about it from the standpoint of, over the years we've seen things like Tank Fizz, we've seen things like Assassin Fizz, same thing with Akali, or same thing with Jarvan in the jungle. Or Nocturne. You can go a variety of builds, you can go a variety of runes. And so depending on how you build those champions is going to depend on your positioning and how you're actually going to play. If you're a really tanky Jarvan, you can go in, you can engage, you can get in their face, you can sustain the damage output while your team comes in and actually does the damage, versus maybe you have somebody else who's a better initiator in the fight. You're going to let them do the actual initial follow through on a team fight, and then you're going to come in and do a lot of damage as Jarvan immediately after. You're still going in and you're hard engaging on their team, but you know that you have to have him take the brunt of the damage so that you can actually come in versus you just going in as a very squishy Jarvan and just getting blown up.
45 seconds on.
So, positioning in team fights. One big thing to consider is it even necessary to team fight? A lot of people, especially in the lower elos, a lot of people don't think of what if the team fight's even necessary. So I think that that's a primary thing to ask yourself. Is the team fight necessary? Because if you look at a lot of the higher end professional games, there's not always a bunch of skirmishes. The fights don't end up being 30, or the matches don't end up being 30, 40 kills at the end of the day. It's a lot lower kill count because they're not taking unnecessary fights. They're not taking unnecessary risks. So whenever you go to evaluate, hey, what's my positioning going to be in a team fight? Is a team fight about to break out? Try to even assess if it's a necessary fight in general. Don't let your brain just be on autopilot and just fight for the sake of fighting, like I mentioned earlier. Think about, is is there a neutral objective that we need to actually contest that's coming up? Do we actually need to team fight to apply pressure to them because we have a really strong lead right now and they can't defend these objectives? Consider things like that. What is the intention or the point of the team fight before actually going in? Beyond that, so what play am I actually setting myself up for, or what play am I setting my team up for? Um, can I peel for my team? Can I engage? Can I disengage? What are the types of situations that ultimately are going to be they're ultimately going to come out of your positioning for that team fight? And then what opportunity am I allowing my opponent to have based on where I position? Well, if you're an AD carry and you're really pushed up in a lane, you're pushed up past your teammate, then of course you're setting yourself up to be engaged upon, right? Same thing if you're a squishy or mage. Let's say you're Lux, you're immobile. Same type situation versus if you're playing behind your team and you're actually set up to deal the damage in a team fight. Those are two way different scenarios. So just try to think through what you're enabling your team as well as the opponent to do based on where you're standing currently. So, what summoner spells, what ultimates, and what items are available on both teams? Always consider that. That's going to help dictate your positioning as well. So if you look down at these images that I have, all of them, or most of the players have a red box around their items. A lot of them are either Zhonya's or stopwatches. You see a Seraph's, you see a Proto Belt, and you see some QSS's. So that is all important information to consider whenever you're going to engage. If you're going in for a gank or you're going in for a tower dive, if you're doing that onto a Zhonya's opponent, it's not really going to go very well. So consider the itemization. Again, if you're going to try and hard CC somebody that has a QSS, they can easily cleanse it and get out of it. Not going to go very well. Beyond that, who has the ultimate advantage, right? So if you look on the right, considering, does everybody have a green dot for their ultimate? That's one of the most helpful things whenever you're considering team fighting is, okay, well, if my whole team, if the games break even, but my whole team has ultimates, you're probably going to have a much better outcome by fighting with everybody's ultimates versus just, oh, somebody's caught out and we should try and dive in on no matter how many people there are, even though we don't have ultimates. Just always try to consider and keep that in mind, as well as the enemy's ultimates. Of course, again, that goes back to how you're going to actually position, and then again, the summoner spells. If the opponents don't have summoner spells, they can't flash to the back line or they can't escape, that's going to dictate where you're going to actually want to position in the team fight as well. So we will cover what to work on here in a little bit, but for now we can actually jump to some of the VODs. So the first one that we're gonna go over, again, I'm gonna do it just like we've kind of done in some of these videos in the last few sessions. Is I'm gonna play it through. I'm gonna let you guys watch. I'm gonna kind of set the stage for what's going on, and then we'll kind of go through and talk about it. So if you look at this current game, this is Fnatic versus Immortals. This is 2017 Worlds, and so if you kind of look at the scores. They're
Maybe with
a little bit of a
45
gold
seconds on
lead on.
Baron. Oh, but
Sorry about that. I was trying to see the exact score. There's a little bit of a gold lead on Fnatic. There's about a 5,000 gold lead. The kills are about the same. Back it up just a little bit. Fnatic has better pressure on Immortals in this situation. But if one thing that I want to break down is that if you look at the gold differential, like I said, it's about 5,000. Realistically, the gold differential is for the most part on Reckless. He has about 600 CS compared to their AD carries, about 422 it looks like. The Everybody else for the most part is about even, but the majority of the gold is on Reckless. This game's at 49 minutes. It's gone late enough to where itemization doesn't really matter. It's just Reckless being so far ahead of his team. A little bit out of position, as you can see, but we'll play it through and then we'll kind of go through the concepts.
huddle up in defensive here. Maybe with 45 seconds on Baron.
Oh, play both the storm. There's the ultimate. The instant flash record. Flash is in there. Oh no! He does get knocked up. Courtney's son. I'm gonna take him down and cap. He gets out of the way, but the rest of Fnatic.
So, like I talked about earlier, if you're the AD carry and you're way out of position, you're way ahead of your team, it's obviously not going to go well. So right here, some of the things that Reckless really should have considered is the fact that he's trying to make a play. It's kind of been a little bit of a stagnant back and forth game, probably getting really frustrating, to be honest. It's almost 50 minutes into the game. He's trying to force and to make a play by trying to get a pick on one of their carries. Good attempt and trying to look for that, but at the same time, I think some of the things that he's not realizing is that number one, Pobelter has Zanya's up. Number two, he's extended a little bit beyond the reach of his team. So let's say that he's not able to get the kill in time, as he doesn't. It's going to be difficult for his team to be able to actually get there and assist him. So ultimately, he does go in for the kill, gets a really good amount of damage, but even if he had gotten one more shot, Pobelter's team's pretty much right there. They have a Janna to be able to shield, to be able to heal, to be able to ultimate, to be able to actually save Pobelter. And I think it would have been insanely difficult for him to actually secure this kill. Ends up, he's able to still even use his Zanya's. Not only that, Reckless actually uses his flash to flash aggressively, and then ultimately gets taken out. The Lulu actually even has the flash to be able to try and ult him and save his life, so that's another summoner spell burned by Lulu to be able to try to save him uneffectively. Caps also ends up having to use his Zanya's and his ultimate to get away, but because of this, because of how late the game is, because of the death timers, ultimately, Immortals is able to run away and take this game because of that one play, because the game has gone so long. So very crucial that if he's going to look for an opportunity like that, he has better positioning, closer in relation to his team, ideally hoping for Pobelter to be further away from his team so that he can, if nothing else, just get the Summoner spell burned and the Zanya's off of Pobelter, and that would probably set them up for a little bit more success. So from there, we're going to jump into SKT versus EDG. This is also actually from Worlds 2017. This has been a pretty dominant game, actually, by
Already got the first Baron. That was huge.
by EDG. They actually have a 9-0 lead. They have better map pressure. They're really, kind of dominating SKT in this game. And we talked about, how a lot of the gold differential on Fnatic's team, not that it mattered as much at that late of a game because everybody almost has full items, but we talked about a lot of the gold differential actually just being on Reckless in that last game. This is actually a team differential for the gold lead on EDG much earlier in the game, so it actually is relevant to the fact that it is a team-oriented gold differential. Again, they have a lot of pressure. They have an inhibitor down. The one thing that they also have is a lot of overconfidence. They've been dominating them, and so they kind of lose respect for, I think, SKT's team composition. And if you look at it, SKT's team composition is very dominant whenever it comes to AoE. Area of effect damage, or trying to get the enemy team grouped up, basically. So we'll play the clip through and then we can talk about it a little bit more.
Waiting for that Drake. They're getting a third Mountain Drake. They already got the first Baron. That was huge for them to actually get a bigger goal lead. They're saving the Drake for now. They got two already. Bang is hiding. He's coming. Bang looking to come in. Here comes your initiation. They're right through. Oh my God. Thunder Shockwave will find them all. And
so, as you can see, a pretty dominant performance by SKT right there. Again, in spite of the gold differential, in spite of the fact that they've been losing all game, this is a pretty massive play, no matter how far they actually are behind, to be able to turn this. So I want to cover a few things right here, and that if you look, EDG actually, they have their summoner spells up. So in theory, you're looking at the fact that Wolf is trying to initiate on Ezra Khan onto them. So if Wolf does flash ult, then they should still be able to get out. They should actually be able to flash his abilities to avoid them. However, if you look at what happens, and I'll just kind of go through this slowly. So first we have Huni, who's actually trying to initiate. They see that he's broadcasting that he's going to start running in. Wolf flashes and goes to use his ult W. What happens is that Huni actually makes the decision to flash right here to silence them. Now, the Xayah still is able to get out with her ultimate, and she's able to flash away. However, the others are silenced. They actually can't use their summoner spells. So they've been caught out of position. They're able to coordinate well enough to where he silences, the Rakan knocks up, the Rakan ulties, the Jarvan knocks them up, and then they're actually able to just clean everything up and pretty much dominate that team fight. So a lot of coordination there, but a lot of being in the right position and coordinating it, as well as EDG being in the wrong position, not respecting their opponent, what their composition's capable of, where they potentially could be. They're kind of just grouped up and not paying as clear of attention in that situation. So, the next video that we're going to go over is a little bit longer, and this is actually much more recent. I didn't want to stick in the past years ago, and I kind of wanted to do something a little bit more recent for the next one. And this is actually from this past weekend of EG playing C9. And if you guys saw, again, setting the stage a little bit, if you guys saw, C9 had a pretty dominant performance in the first two games. They've been doing quite well all season if you've been following along. They have a moderate gold lead, but nothing substantial, nothing overwhelming. And there's 2 dragons to 1. EG has the 2, obviously, as you can see. And Cloud9, the dragon just recently came up, I believe, about 20 or so seconds before the start of this. And C9's wanting to contest the dragon. Now, again, we'll play it through, and then we'll go back through it. I don't want to give any spoilers. If you saw the game, fantastic.
Almost going to land. Not going to catch Blabber. Going to go for a bit of an engage. Here comes the stun. The wall at the top. It pushes Zuki to the backside, but that might be enough time to rush down this Drake. We'll see. It's going to fall in a couple of seconds, and here comes the re-engage. Is it going to be enough? They flash forward. They find a huge ulti out of Bang, and that's going to pull Zven into safety. No, it's going to put him right back in the jaws of defeat. 2 kills picked up, plus the Drake, and here comes the re-engage. Looker's gonna try on the backside, 1 versus 3. It's not gonna be enough. Bang is safe to free fire. There's the second kill picked up. And with the 3 members of Cloud9, they will do the best they can, but it's not going to be enough. They're gonna try as hard as he's asleep. Just gonna hit him in the back, and easy enough.
Okay, so let's rewind and
word here.
Go play by play. So, like I said, obviously they're trying to set up for Dragon. As you saw, a very AoE-oriented composition yet again, like we just saw in the last clip with SKT versus EG. Very similar situation. If you look at this team composition, of course, if a team fight's going to break out, all of these guys want to coordinate and have their ultimates set up. Braum's AoE. Bang, or sorry, not Bang. Philios is AoE. Gragas, and then of course Poppy can to an extent, but probably, as you saw, not a good idea to necessarily knock everybody away when they're trying to get kills. But they have three very good damaging abilities that are AoE, and so ultimately what I think the discussion needed to be here is let's contest Dragon, and this goes back to the effective communication. Let's contest Dragon. If we can't, what's the exit strategy going to be? How are we going to exit? So ultimately they come up, Niski gets a really great wall onto the entire team. It blocks them off. At the same time, you need to keep in mind that, okay, you can see that they're not necessarily backing off of the wall. So they're likely going to contest to do something there. Zoe ends up, this isn't a major deal, but Zoe ends up getting redemption. She actually hits everybody with it. It's not a substantial amount of damage, but it is an additive here in that situation that they're trying to Zerg down Dragon and they're trying to do as much damage as quickly as they can, so they disregard the damage entirely. Licorice is positioned in the back of the Dragon Pit. He can easily escape by just using his E over the wall, which he does, so we see him do that. However, again, this goes back to, are we going to exit as a team? Are we going to try to contest this team fight? Are we stronger here? It looks very disjointed. Licorice exits out of the Dragon Pit. Ultimately, Blabber gets knocked out, and then the remaining members of C9 try to exit through River. So, if you, again, go back to their team composition, as soon as the wall goes down, they also have summoner spells. They're immediately able to flash in and Braum ult to set up the three players to get hit by the Aphelios ultimate, regardless of if C9 has summoner spells up or not, and then following that up with Gragas ult and the remainder of the damage. So, again, playing it through, that's exactly what happens. The Braum is easily able to flash in, coordinate that with the Aphelios ultimate. That's a ton of damage to them. And then, ultimately, because Licorice is actually exiting the Dragon Pit, it's really easy for EG right here to make this play. It turns it into a 4v5. And then ultimately, because of Poppy utilizing her R on Pantheon, it turns it into a 3v5. So they don't really have any concern. Gragas is also able to go in and actually smite away and steal the dragon because Pantheon also gets ulted away. So I think that at this point, as well, Tom Kinch is stunned up right here, unfortunately. He's able to walk away. Niski's still trying to contest a little bit, able to actually deter that. But I think that the biggest thing right here is that it looks like, if we go back to it, it looks like there's a little miscommunication as far as what they're wanting to do. Licorice tries to actually walk back in towards towards EG, and at this point the play should have just been called off, and he should have actually routed back to mid lane to be able to just escape. Versus trying to do that, he could have saved the death. Ultimately, Niski gets away, but Blabber goes to contest onto Zoe, and then obviously gets killed there as well. So it seems a little disjointed in the communication, a little disjointed in the positioning as far as what they were ultimately wanting to do, and obviously had a negative impact on how they played this match. Now, ultimately, C9 didn't suffer too much for too long, so it's okay. But still, could have definitely improved in this one game. That I think that is the one that they did end up losing, if I'm not mistaken. So, from there, we're actually going to jump back in time, and we're going to go to the finals from last year against FPX and G2. This is a little bit of a longer clip. So, again, we'll play it through, and then we'll gradually go through it, but it is a little bit of a longer clip than the other ones, but I want you guys to kind of fully see what happens and how it transpires.
damage from that volatile spiraling, and with the Banshee's Veil, Wonder feels more confident to step up. A 30-minute Infernal could be very valuable. Dredgeline is dodged away from as the Drake is secure, but now G2 are split. That's at least some CC to interrupt. The chain of corruption will start to spread, and it's Mickey that gets tagged. He's locked down, he's knocked up, he's dead! LWX is on a rampage. The Sivir is terrifying. There goes the teleport, the the king! Tian, you beauty! Gets the double kill for FPX.
The flash to gap close, but Domi might die here.
He might just indeed. 2 more teleports thrown down. Realm Warp's coming out, and they manage to escape. Wandering Caps run for their lives. 3 members of G2 Esports are down. Death from below is available for Caps. Can he snipe 2 and B? He does! He gets the kill. 10 kills to 5. Now it's a 2v4 inside the pits.
The G2 solo laners, all that's left for them to try and defend the Baron. Quick shot.
There's a death from below available to Caps. He manages to get the skewer. Wonder takes so much damage from the barrels. Goes straight in, but the ulti does nothing. Baron's putting Lissa to help G2. And finally, Wonder goes down. Gimgoon is low on HP. 8 seconds left before forward.
Okay, so again, let's set the stage. So the game has been fairly slow paced up until this point. I guess it's more of a gentleman's game, I suppose you can refer to it. Both teams have been farming a pretty good amount. It was a little bit boring compared to other games, but towers are even. So gold's really not that far off. I think it's about a little over 1,000 gold difference. Nothing substantial, nothing that is really going to favor one over the other. But so it's a fairly even game. What we're looking at is FPX is actually trying to get priority in the mid lane currently. And so, again, consider the team composition, consider the summoner spells, and consider the itemization throughout all of this. So if we look, G2 is trying to set up for this dragon, and the 2 members of G2 are trying to set up for this dragon. The other 3 members are trying to posture a little bit aggressively here to actually dissuade FPX from engaging, maybe just try and get some chip damage, maybe try and poke them out a little bit. It could have been a miscommunication that these 3 were doing this and they all should have gone to dragon, but at the same time the strategy could have been that they were aiming to actually dissuade them from doing it. One of the things that, going back to considering the team composition, that G2 should be looking at here, though, is, yes, FPX is postured in the mid lane. They're a decent distance away. They are trying to clear this mid wave. However, they can clear it rather quickly because they have both Gangplank as well as Sivir, and they have a Nautilus that's building a pretty good amount of AP. So those 3 in combination can pretty much destroy the wave immediately. So again, going back to the Sivir, well, the Sivir has ultimate, so that's going to enhance their engage ability, and all she really has to do is get either Lee Sin or Nautilus in range to be able to actually make a play. So that's exactly what they do. Ultimately, they group up. Sivir uses her R, and you have, this is where the disjointed communication and the exit strategy backing off gets a little clunky and wonky again, which is why I'm also so big on effective communication. You have Tom Kinch, and he's actually exiting this way versus the Pyke and the Ryze exiting towards the enemy jungle. So they're a little split on their exit. They weren't really grouped. Easily able to prevent them from actually wanting to engage. Pyke uses his E to actually have to get out, so it's hard for him to be able to get back in the fight. Ryze is still caught on the other side. He would have to, potentially flash or walk around to be able to get back into the fight. So they get the dragon. However, as you guys saw, the Tom Kinch is actually going to get caught out right here. Elise trying to peel as best as she can, as well as, I believe, Varus right here, right? So Varus uses his ultimate, trying to peel yet again. Lee Sin's able to actually connect. He gets on him. He slows him. Now, Tom Kinch does have flash, so he could flash, but one thing that I want to cover right here is that you'll notice that Lee Sin's actually going to go around. So rather than continuing to do damage to Tom Kinch, he trusts his team to be able to engage with the remaining members and with the Nautilus hook to be able to get onto them. They're able to CC him. You see G2 a little bit out of position. They're trying to flank on this team fight. FPX is still doing a good job of being relatively grouped together. It's about to turn into a 5v4 potentially. G2 still trying to follow up behind. Lee Sin still covering going around. So if Tahm Kench flashes, which he whiffed the flash and he basically just flashed down instead of over the wall. If he were to have flashed over, Lee Sin was here to either hit the blast cone and force him back into the team, or he could just kill. He could get the kill for himself and be on the other side. At this point, you can see that G2 is still trying to run away. So the kill on Tahm Kench is secured. There's no way he's getting away. What Lee Sin is able to do is he actually has a stopwatch. If you looked at his items before we actually started the clip, it'll show that he actually has a stopwatch. So there's a couple of different options that Perks and Yankos are actually able to go through. Is they can go down and they can either go back through their bot lane, or they can go further into enemy territory. And Lee Sin knows that. So because he has the stopwatch, he can posture a little bit more aggressively. If they do go back towards their base, he's able to actually cut them off, buy enough time for his team to catch up. If they go back towards the enemy territory, then the enemy team is actually able to cut them off. So again, he's able to ward hop, flash, Q, and stop both of them with his kick. They're able to clean up these kills. So really good positioning and looks by the Lee Sin to be able to cut off either of the options, as well as you see the gangplank. Hey, if they were to just keep running down, he's going to try and cut them off in this direction, and the remaining members go this way. So very intentional positioning with the routes that they're taking, as well as intentional setup with the ultimates that they're utilizing and how they're utilizing them. So you would think that this would be the end of the play. However, Nautilus sees that the Pyke and the Ryze are actually trying to get some semblance of wave management and get something going for them. So they stick around just a little bit longer, thinking that, hey, we can push this wave at least, and then we can go ahead and back off of that. They both decide to go in. It's initially a 1v2. However, again, this goes back to both itemization as well as summoner spells. The Nautilus feels confident that he can go in to buy enough time for his teammates to use TP. So all he needed to do was go in, see if the two players would actually stay. And if they did, like they did, he has both his W, which makes him a little bit tankier as well because it provides him that shield, but also having his flash up if he really needs to use it in escape, as well as the stopwatch, are going to buy enough time for the other two players to actually come in and utilize their teleports to potentially secure these kills. Now, ultimately, the Ryze is able to ultimate them away. No pun or redundancy intended. But he's able to get them out of the situation so that they can survive. However, it's now a 5v2, and they're set up for good Baron positioning. So, yes, the Nautilus does go down to the Pyke ultimate. However, as you saw, they're actually able to still force on Baron. They end up getting the kill onto Ryze. The Pyke has to actually disengage from it and narrowly escape. Misses the ultimate, but ultimately, because of this positioning, because of everything that they did, they're actually able to secure the Baron, and this secures them game 1 of the series for Worlds of last year. Obviously, this is one very long play, but one very long play with a lot of execution on positioning, a lot of execution on how they're going to use their itemization, a lot of execution on how they're going to use their summoner spells, on their ultimates, so on and so forth. And again, because of that proper execution and the proper placement and everything, that is what led to them getting that first win. So guys, if we jump back onto the presentation, what to work on? What's your homework? Again, not to have a negative connotation, but what's the homework that you guys can work on in your games? So consider every time you make a pick in Champion Select, think of how it synergizes with your team composition, and then think of how you're going to play those team compositions, what your positioning is going to be in fights. If you're really far behind, definitely make sure and play accordingly, right? You're not going to be as strong, you're not going to be as tanky, you're not going to deal as much damage, so position accordingly. Try to bait the enemy team into fights and making them make poor decisions with their positioning. At the opposite end of that, maybe you guys are demolishing the other team. Try and catch them out more. Try and force them to make bad plays. Try and get in their face because they haven't been able to actually contest and to do anything, and force them to try and contest objectives that they're not strong enough to actually be able to hold. But again, depending on what your role is, depending on what your itemization is, the current game state with your summoner spells, try to position accordingly. Just start taking that into consideration. Maybe you get lost. Maybe it gets lost track of in late game, but you do a really good job of it in the early game. Just keep consistent with it. Keep trying to do it over and over, and it will become a regular habit. Beyond that, let's say that you are a really squishy AD carry. Well, if you have an Alistar, a Leona, a Tahm Kench, something of that nature, let your support know that you need peels in the fight. Communicate with your team how you think you should play the fight. At the end of the day, maybe you have a teammate in the match with you that they're seeing the game a little bit differently, and they think that you guys should go on somebody else. You think that you should go on somebody else. Maybe you think that, again, you need peels. You guys are learning from each other in the match, so try and communicate with your team on what you think should happen. And then, again, if you're a carrier or squishy, try to avoid being too aggressive. One rule of thumb that you can go by is try to avoid being in a position where you can be hit by multiple enemies. Always try to limit yourself to being hit by one person, or try to utilize your champion's range to your maximum advantage so that you can continuously do damage. But like we talked about in one of the previous sessions, utilizing that orb walking to be able to maximize your damage while still being in good positioning, so you're not getting hit by multiple people. So with that, definitely take those things into consideration. And if you're going to be able to join us for either Thursday or next Tuesday, kind of report back. So, talk us through what struggles you had, what successes you had, and then we can find out some more what other information we can give you to help you out in some fights. But as always, this is going to be kind of the Q&A piece. If you are going to head out at this point, please, again, make sure to always fill out the questionnaire before we conclude the session. You guys have a chance to win free RP. Again, as I always say, who doesn't like free stuff? So please do that before you leave. But having said that, do we have any questions from you guys, either about team fighting or in positioning, either neutral objectives, communication, some of the stuff we've covered previously, or something that we're going to cover in a future session, or maybe something that isn't on the agenda that you guys are just curious about? Okay, so as an ADC, how do you deal with not having a front line? I can't make anyone play any specific champs, nor do I want to. Yeah, that's fair. But you find that people play what they want to play over what might be better for the team composition. So my first question is: is this in a team environment, or is this an actual solo queue? Because yeah, it is difficult to try and get a team composition that works really well together in solo queue. It's not always going to be optimal. If you don't have a front line, you can't necessarily just go engage as an AD carry. So the best thing that you can do is just try and set yourself up for optimal scenarios with your position. Try and position yourself behind the tankiest person. Again, if we go back to the scenario of, well, let's say your tankiest person is an assassin Jarvan, who's full damage. Well, he's still going to be your initiate, and he's still going to be your engage. He's still going to provide some crowd control whenever he goes in, right? So try and at least position around him whenever he goes in, or position around your team whenever they do have some form of crowd control, so that you can use those crowd control windows to actually output damage during that, so that you're actually not taking damage back. Again, also always communicate your summoner spells. Those are going to be key. Is if you don't have any frontline, it's not an optimal scenario. It's an irregular scenario in a team environment, because that's how you want to set your team compositions up. But you're utilizing what you have to the best of your abilities. So try to fight around your summoner spells, because that will at least enable you guys to have some form of escape, knowing that you guys are squishier. I think that as you do start to climb the ranking system, in theory, people should actually start building or I guess synergizing team compositions a little well, and understand how they should be drafting. But it can be a pretty frustrating situation to have it when people don't draft the right way. But in those types of games, my best advice is, focus on, hey, I'm going to do whatever I can do with whatever I have. Don't let the frustration of the ill-advised team composition be the scenario. But it doesn't hurt to, you don't have to make anybody play a frontline, but I mean, you can suggest it. Hey guys, we don't really have anybody that's a tank. Would somebody mind playing a tank? Does anybody play any tanks? Something of that nature. Just suggesting it. Maybe somebody's just not paying attention to the team composition at all, and they're just like, oh, hey, I just want to play this champion. So that way you're not forcing anybody, but suggesting doesn't hurt. As a follow-up, let's see. Yeah, that makes sense. And I think that that's going to be the case. So you're saying that your damage numbers, your deaths are low, but your damage numbers are low because you can't really output the amount of damage, because you have nobody to cover for you. And I mean, I'd be interested if you can remember the specific composition. Maybe I can, kind of dig into that and talk about that a little bit more. But the scenario is not going to be optimal. So your damage numbers aren't going to be optimal. Your farm numbers, maybe outside of the laning phase, probably aren't going to be as optimal. It's not an optimal scenario. And all you can do is, play around what's given to you. But I wouldn't expect to have your damage be what it should be, because of having to play so defensively. One thing that you can do is, if you can extend the laning phase as long as possible, try to get even fights where, as an ADC, if you're winning lane with your support, if you can try to keep it into a laning phase and you guys just continue to split through the bot, if your remaining 3 members can, or you can swap to the top, whatever the situation may call for, if you can get the remaining 3 members to actually continue to... Oh, sorry about that, guys. If you can get the remaining 3 members to actually split the situation, then you can have a better chance there. Because if you're winning in the bot lane, your support and your ADC composition is clearly doing well. So extend that as long as possible. Hopefully you can continue to win. That way you're putting the enemy team further behind. And then you can potentially just win through the bot lane and push all the way to their nexus. Not an always available option, but it is an option. Really good question, though. Any other questions, guys? Let's see. Jace. Okay, so I appreciate you remembering the composition. Let's see. Jace top, Shaco jungle, Lucian mid, Kai'Sa. Yeah, that's a rough one. So, do you remember what the opponent's composition was? So what I'll say, regardless of the opponent's composition, what I'll say is kind of the strategy for that is, you guys have all damage dealers. You have very little support. Not only do you have all damage dealers, you have all AD. So what's ultimately going to happen is if they even have one tank, which in this meta it would be good if they had a tank or a bruiser. What's going to happen is that they can just build armor, and that you guys are countered through that. So you have to win the game very early. So with Shaco, he's going to need a really good start. So you're going to want to try and set the Shaco up for as much success early on so that he can gank for lanes. He can try to counter the enemy jungler. You really want to set them behind and maintain that tempo as much as possible. You guys are going to have to try and... I apologize, my cat tried to jump up. You guys are going to try and have to win early as much as possible. If you can't, you're probably not going to win that game, or it's going to be very difficult. The Jace, in theory, should be able to try and split push if he gets ahead in lane. But because you guys have basically Senna as another AD carry, you have Kai'Sa as an AD carry, you have Lucian as an AD carry, if you guys can try to get that early lead and just pressure turrets, try to get plates, try to get turrets as much as possible. You guys are going to have to win as early as possible and just output as much damage. Again, you're going to have to try and play around, if Senna gets a root, if you're able to get any form of CC out of Senna, you guys can look to get picks that way. But it is going to be very situational and circumstantial, and it's not an easy win by any means, but if you can get the early lead, if you can get the objectives done and start snowballing early, you just have to keep them from getting tanky, and you guys have to look to push your lead as early as possible, and that's going to be how you win that game. Yeah, a Fizz though. Yeah, that if the Fizz was break even or even fed at all, then yeah, I can imagine that that was a very difficult game because there's no form of CC to really peel for you, and he can just immune the center route. So does not sound like a very fun game, I'll be honest. Any other scenarios? Any other questions from you guys? Yeah. So you found playing Trist has been your biggest success lately. I would think that hard escape champions are probably going to be the best scenario for that if you don't have a tank. So Xayah has an immune, so that's obviously really helpful if the Fizz uses his E to actually get onto you from that standpoint. Xayah would be good. The Lucian would be good with his dash. Trist has her jump to get away. Any of the AD carries that are going to offer you a little bit more mobility so that you can jump onto or out of a fight, those are probably going to be your best bets if you're consistently finding that people are unwilling to play tanks. But again, all I could say is you can suggest it. You're not making anybody play at that point, but you can suggest that they try and play it, and maybe that you'll find a little bit more success and better team compositions there. Well, guys, if I'm happy to stay and answer questions, but if there aren't any more questions, please again make sure and fill out the survey. If you fill out a survey, you're entered in the drawing to win RP, and again, you can get cool skins for Tristana potentially, right? So, I appreciate you guys making it out today, and again, we will have another session on Thursday at the same time for the developmental. Typically at a pretty decent early lead is Trist. No one in high gold or plat expects her level 2 or 3. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, she can output some pretty good damage early on that not everybody's always aware of. Not only that, if you do get those strong leads, she's a monster at taking towers and trying to get early objectives because of her E. Definitely a good option. All right, guys. Well, I appreciate everybody making it out today. And again, we'll be back at Thursday at the same time. So thank you guys. Please don't forget to fill out the survey, and we will see you on Thursday.